All right, Masechet Eruvin, Daf Peh Bet. We are beginning the eighth Perek. The topics we're going to cover are about food, the food that we use for an Eruv, specifically Eruv Techumin. First, we're going to talk about how you can only use it for a mitzvah, and that you can use it, just designate it retroactively. We'll see that will be the Gemara. But then more directly on the Mishnah, uh, uh, well, not directly on the Mishnah, but a side point is making an eruv for others. Does if a mother makes an eruv, does that include her child and how young? If a father makes an eruv and he has in mind his household, does he need their permission or not? And finally, this is the most directly connected to the Mishnah, how much bread is considered a meal. We'll see a number of different calculations for that. So we begin with the Mishnah. Kesad mishtatefin b'techumin. מניח את החבית ואומר, הרי זה לכל בני עירי. Okay, yeah, good. How does one make an eruv techumin? Now, obviously, the simplest way is for each person to go out. Not the simplest way, but the standard way is you yourself. You go and put one there. But sometimes the whole city would want to. For example, we'll see right now if there's as a wedding that's going to be outside the city more than 2,000 amot, and many people or the whole city are invited there. So now every single person has to go and bring a meal and put it at 2,000 amot. That's a pain. So rather, you want one person to do it for everyone, then you can do that. You take the chavit and you say this, you put it at 2,000 amot outside the city, and you say, this, I am putting this here on behalf of all the people in my city. Anyone who wants to go visit, let's say the person who is in Avel outside the city, and people want to go and walk there on Shabbat. So he does it for everyone. mutar. asur. So the people in the city, on the other hand, have to accept it. If on Friday before Shabbat, right, the guy will go and make an announcement, hey everyone, I made an eruv on behalf of all of you. I put some a meal there, 2,000 amot east of the city, so that you can all go to the wedding. The people inside, if they say, oh yeah, I want to go to the wedding party, not they wouldn't actually do the ceremony, but they do the party on Shabbat. So if they say, I want to go to the wedding party, then they'll have in mind, I'm going to rely on the eruv that this person made. But if they didn't have that in mind, they didn't hear about it, or they thought they weren't going to go, they can't change their mind on Shabbat and say, oh, you know what, I do want to go, I'm going to rely on that eruv. You have to decide whether where is your place, are you going to rely on that eruv or not, before it gets dark. That's the Mishnah. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef, en me'arvin ela lidvar mitzvah. So he has a statement important, the halacha. You can only make an eruv techumin for a mitzvah. This is not true of all eruvin. If you want to make eruv chatzerot, so that you can carry, it doesn't have to be specifically for a mitzvah. But this one is. Okay, you can't just be going out because you want to go for a stroll more than 2,000 moto outside the city. My kamash ma'lan, tanena lechol mi she'elech lebet ha'abel, or lebet ha'mishteh. Says Rav Yosef, why do you need to even tell us this? The Mishnah says it, that if you want to go to a wedding, that's a mitzvah, to make happy the chatan and kala, or to give comfort to the avel. So those are mitzvot. So obviously, it's for a mitzvah. Those are the examples that are brought in the Mishnah. Why need to tell us that, Rav Yosef? I might have thought that the Mishnah is giving us common examples. Why do people usually go out of their way and walk farther than normal? Probably because of a mitzvah. But maybe for any reason it would be okay. So therefore, Rav Yosef says specifically these examples and others like it. Like if there's a speaker in the town next over, rabbi is giving a guest shiur, and you want to go there, that's also a good reason, but it has to be for a mitzvah. All right, now you have to accept it upon yourself the day before and say, yes, I'm going to agree to that eruv that person made on behalf of us. Shamat mina and berera. So, we can derive from this that there is no retroactive designation. Because if you did believe in retroactive designation, then that would mean that even on Shabbat itself, I can decide, oh, you know what? I think I do want to rely on the Eruv. And then retroactively, it will click in from before Shabbat. The yesh b'rira tigle milita the mafreya. The be'ajom hava nichale. It's not so much retroactive as now it's discovering, it's a clarification on what my presumed subconscious thought was beforehand. So now I'm revealing that, yes, indeed, I had wanted to go to the wedding and use it. But from the fact that the Mishnah says you have to decide before it gets dark, not after it gets dark, means you cannot decide retroactively. So should we learn that? This is a problem because there are lots of other places where we discuss Perera and we don't decide conclusively. So, we should not be able to decide conclusively here if we didn't anywhere else. So, Amar Vashe hodiuhu velo hodiu katane. Says, no, it might even be retroactive. When the Mishnah was saying you have to decide before it gets dark or not, that's talking about whether he was informed or not. You have to be informed before Shabbat starts that there is an Eruv there. If you didn't even know that one person went out and made an Eruv on behalf of anyone else, and then on Shabbat, you hear, oh, that person had made an Eruv. Oh, I want to rely on it. That's no good because there's no way, that's not revealing what you originally thought because you didn't even know that anyone put an Eruv there. Or rather, but if you did hear, there was an announcement, there is an Eruv, I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't decide before Shabbat, but I knew there was an Eruv. Then on Shabbat, I can decide whether I had wanted to accept it or not. So in fact, you could read the Mishnah as that there is possibility for retroactive designation. Okay, good. So we saw those are the first two topics on our outline, and now what we're going to see a question is a mother makes an eruv for herself, only for herself. Is the child included within her eruv? Right? I'm not talking about a case where she says, I'm going to make this eruv on behalf of my child. That's the next case, right? She only does herself. Is just like anything that a person owns, the truth is part of their eruv. If I have a hat, my hat can only go as far as I can go. So that if I see you on the street and you say, oh, I'm really cold, can I borrow your hat? I give you my hat. You can only take my hat in my eruv, right? So even inanimate objects are part of a person's eruv. Or the same thing with animals. If my animals, even someone who's going and shepherding my animals for me, like a dog walker or something, right, can only take them in wherever I can carry. So a child, as a kind of a subsidiary to the mother, especially a baby who is dependent on the mother, is very much like an extension and part of the mother. And so the question is how old? Everyone agrees that an infant is part of the mother, doesn't need its own eruv, and the infant can travel. Let's say can walk, right? It can walk as far wherever the mother can and doesn't need its own eruv. How old is that? So everybody agrees until 4 and 5 is part of the mother. The question is how about 6? So we'll see two opinions. Rav Asi says 6 is also part of the mother, and we'll see another opinion that says no, and we'll see a couple of baraitot and make some distinctions. So let's see, and then we'll come back to the outline. Amad of Asi, Katan ben Shesh, Yoseh be'eruv imo. Yes, 6 years old is also considered an infant or a toddler. Needs his mother. Metzi be'katan shesarich limo Yoseh be'eruv imo. Ve'en shesarich limo en Yoseh be'eruv imo. Now we're going to question Avaseh from a Braita. Because here it says, a child that needs his mother. I mean, everybody needs their mom, even when we're adults, right? But what I'm talking about, can't get along without the mother, can't do anything. Then is fulfilled with the mother's eruv. But if the child is independent, can go on, does not go under the child under the mother. Now this doesn't designate what age. How old is that sarichim or not? Well, we're going to prove it. It's going to take a few lines to prove how old this is. In Masechet Sukkah has a similar designation that a child who is not dependent on his mother has to sit in the sukkah. That's important. It's not the bar mitzvah age, right? But rather is not part of the not dependent on the mother. So v'havinan ba, and on that Mishnah we had a discussion. Ezu katan shen tzarich limo. How do you define that age? Amri deber biyanai kol shenifneh ve'enimo mekanachto. As long as the baby can go to the bathroom number two and doesn't need his mother to wipe, a potty trained plus, right? Doesn't even need to be wiped. Okay, so I don't know how old that is, but well, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, Kol sheneor ve'eno kore ima. Any child who wakes up and doesn't call his mother. Wait a second. Ima salkadatech gedulim nami karu. Everybody calls their mother. Well, gedulim doesn't mean adults. It means even older children, right? They wake up and they need their mother. They need they need a drink. They need help getting dressed. I don't know. Ela ema kol sheneor mishenato ve'eno kore ima ima. It means that they don't call ima here twice. In other words, they don't keep saying mommy, 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 and mommy, right? They call their mother like once because they actually need something, not just an existential. They can't survive without their mother being next to them. So that's the younger age. V'kama, well, how old is that? About 4 or 5. I mean, it'll depend on each kid and their development. But here's that. So that's the clincher of the question. Rav Aseh, you said a 6-year-old is still dependent on his mother and can be included in the eruv. But this baraita says dependent on the mother is not dependent on the mother is not, and we define that age as 4 and 5 is dependent on the mother. 6 is not dependent on the mother, and therefore 6 should not be within her eruv. So that's the question on Rav Aseh. Here it says 4 or 5, and you said 6. Amarav, we're going to try to answer that. Amarav Yoshua bered Rav Idi, Kika Amarav Asi, Kigon she'arev alav aviv lesafon, v'imo ladarom, tafilu bar shesh nameh besavta di'imeh nicha le. So he's siding with the Braita and the Mishnah. It says really it's 4 or 5. You're right. If it's just the mother and the child, it's going to be 4 or 5. Rav Aseh was talking about a special case where the father and the mother both made Eruvin for themselves. The father to the north, the mother to the south. I don't know what this says about the relationship. They're really pulling the child in 2 different directions, literally, right? But anyway, they're invited to 2 sebbits. The father's going to go to one up north, then the mother down to the south. And in that case, which one will the child be included in? In that case, a 6-year-old who has to decide between his father and mother will decide to go with his mother, right? In other words, 6-year-old still feels closer to his mother than the father. Older than that, then they would go with the father. This is interesting. It tells something about the development of children and the relationship between parents. It seems that the mother was more connected and hands-on with the baby and infant, and once the child was like of school age, right around 6 years old, then probably the father would start bringing them up and teaching them and apprenticeship, and would have a closer relationship with the father. But the fathers definitely were very involved just after they're potty trained. Okay, good. So that would explain that. Metibed. Now we have a question even on that. Katan shesarich le'imo yoseh be'aruv imo ad ben shesh. So here we have a braita that says child needs his mother. He can be included in it until 6 years old. So this says until 6 years old, but not 6 years old. So this would seem tiyubta de Rabbi Yoshua bar Rav Idi tiyubta. So here it says until 6, and Rabbi Yoshua bar Idi said even 6 in such a case. So therefore, well, okay, the question I think is I'm confusing it with the next line. So here the question seems to be until 6. So 6 years old is okay. Rabbi Yoshua Bered Ravidi said 6 years old is only in this special case where the father's going one way and the mother's going another way. But otherwise it would be 4 and 5. But here it says 6. So this baraita really goes back to Rav Asi's pshat and against Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and so we reject his answer. Now, although we rejected his answer and this would seem to be a proof for Rav Aseh. It doesn't quite prove Rav Aseh either. Lema tevet yubted Rav Aseh, because it says until six. Until six means five, but not six, right? No, Rav Aseh could say, Amar Rav Aseh, ad vad bichlal. It includes also six. So that's a possibility. All right, and either way, it would seem to be possible to answer the question to Rav Yoshua Bered Ravidi, but for some reason the Gemara doesn't do that. Okay, so we that's okay. Now lema tevet yubtad Yanai v'resh lakish. So once it does include six, now this would seem to be a problem for the Yanai and Resh Lakish. They're the ones that said, what is the definition of needing its mother till till he's potty trained, or until he doesn't cry mommy mommy when he wakes up? And we said that's 4 or 5, but yet this says 6. La kashya ha deite abuhi b'mata ha de la ite abuhi b'mata. Depends if the father is in town or not. Yeah, Resh Lakish referring to a situation where the child's father is in town. Since the child can go with the father, then he doesn't need the mother. So a 6-year-old who has both parents is going to prefer the father. But if the father's out of town, then the child still needs someone and still needs his mother. And so if the father's not around, then yes, we'll require the mother to be 6. Okay, once we have this answer, we really could have used this answer to solve the one before. So we have multiple ways of resolving all of these baraitot. But the bottom line is we have, I guess, 4 basic distinctions. Is a 6-year-old included with the mother? Rabbi says yes. And the second baraita would seem to say that also. The Biyanai Shakish seems to say no, only 4 or 5. And other ways to make a distinction, perhaps only if the father made a competing eruv, then we'll go with the mother. Or if the father is in town, then he would go with the father. But if the father is not in town, then yes, can be included with under 6. All right, so those are all the answers to that question. And now we get to the next one, which is, can a father make an eruv for his household? Here, in the first case, she was making it only for herself. In this case, the father is making it for all of his household. Does he need to get their permission and agreement or not? Okay, so now, Tanura Banan. Marev Adam al yedeh beno ubito haketanim val yedeh avdo v'shifchato hakenaanim. So a person can make eruv al yedeh on behalf of his son and his daughter who are minors. So we can have them in mind. I'm putting this eruv here because we're all going to go on a family trip tomorrow, and the kids don't have to even know about it or acknowledge it. Probably even if they say no, we don't want to go, we hate going to grandma. This doesn't matter. He still can make the eruv for them. Also, he has power over his non-Jewish slaves and maidservants. They are his property and his extension of his hand, so he can decide for them. Ben ledatan, ben shelo ledatan, whether with their knowledge or even without their knowledge. Okay, I mean, now the children, right? Once again, children don't have to keep halacha themselves, right? But we can't make them violate halacha. So we're not allowed to feed a child non-kosher food, even though they themselves are not chayav in mitzvot. And so the children here, if I'm taking them somewhere, if I'm walking them outside the eruv, then I would be violating because they educationally. Also, as property, just like my hat I can't take outside, so too, something that's within my household cannot be taken outside. Okay, so that's regard to children. Aval eno me'arev lo ayedeh avdo v'shifchato ivrim. However, I may not make an eruv for my Jewish slave or manservant, because a Jewish, they're called slave, but really are more like a hired help that can't get that can't leave, and so they're independent. And not grown children, and also not for his wife. She's an adult, she has her own mind, and so therefore I cannot make an eruv for her any more than I can make an eruv for a neighbor or a stranger. They have to be in agreement with it. They have to know about it. Okay, that's B'raitan number one. B'raita number two is almost exactly the same, except it adds on another section. So the first part just says it in the opposite order. Tana idach lo yarev adam el yedei beno bito hagedolim ve'al yedei avdo av shifrato ivrim ve'lo yedei ishto ela midatan. So all these people who are adults or Jewish servant, they have to agree to it. אבל מערב הוא על ידי עבדו ושפחתו הכנענים, ועל ידי בנו ביתו הקטנים, בין לדעתן, בין שלא לדעתן, מפני שידן כידו. But the children and the non-Jewish slaves, their hand is like your hand. They are extensions of yourself. So if you made the eruv for yourself, they can be included without their knowledge. And now we add, v'chulan she'ervu ve'erev alehen rabban yotzin b'shel rabban. Even if they make an eruv for themselves, right? So, my little kid goes and makes an eruv for himself. And or this is Rabban, or the servant also, the non-Jewish servant goes and makes an eruv for himself. He's not Jewish, but he's Eved Kanani. So that means like he's half converted, right? He has the halachot of like a woman. So he does have to keep this halacha and can't go outside the Techum Shabbat. He makes his own and to the west. And I make one to the east for him if I'm the owner. Then mine trumps over his, right? So they have to go with their masters. All that is true except for the wife, because the wife can object. She could say, no, I don't want to go where you go. She has her own mind. Okay, now this doesn't seem to be really necessary to say because the Isha was already included in the ones that appear that you can't do that he cannot make for her. So why is it specifically saying excluding the wife? What about everyone else, the adult children, the Jewish slave? So that's the end of the Baraita. The Gemara asks, Isha Maishana, why specifically the woman that he's saying she can object? What about everybody else? Isha the wife and anyone like her, all those who are adults who have independent minds, they in those cases they can make their own. And they cannot be forced to follow the husbands or the fathers. Good. Amar Mor. Now we just said in the Braita, chutz min ha'isha, mipnei sheyochla lemachot, except for because she could object. We're understanding now she could object as she did object, right? And this would seem to say that the only reason the wife is not included is because she objected. But what if she didn't say anything at all? Tama demacheh hasetama. That would suggest that in a standard, she says nothing, by default, she would be included in the husbands, even if she didn't acquiesce and say, yes, I'm in. Okay, so that's what this last line would suggest. But the first line says, unless they know about it. My love de amre'in, doesn't that mean that they have to say, yes, I agree to it? Right? And that would say if they didn't say anything at all, then they did not agree, and it's not good. So we all know that if she says no, then she is not included. If she says yes, she is included. But when she says nothing, is that an assumption of yes, you're okay, or no, not until you agree to it? There seems to be a self-contradiction between the ending and then the beginning. It says la may elamidatam. What's mean elamidatam in the beginning? The ishtiku. It means that she didn't say anything, and that's considered like she said okay. It's only excluding when she says no, but shetika kehodaa. Not saying anything is like she's agreeing. All right, fine. But what about that? The case of the non-Jewish slave, where it says if they made their own eruv and then the master also made an eruv, they follow the master, and they didn't say anything, and so it must be a case where they didn't say anything. Ustamahu vekatane chutz min ha'isha de la nafkeh. And so even though they didn't say anything, so too the next line with the wife is also when she didn't say anything, and it says except for her. So that sounds like if she doesn't say anything, she's not included. She has to object. So which one is it? Amarava kevan she'irvu and lecha michui gadol mizeh. No, I can resolve that. In that second half of the Braita, when it says that the non-Jewish slave made their own eruv, Well, there's no greater way of objecting than making your own eruv, right? That's even better than saying, no, I don't want to go with you, right? The maidservant non-Jewish maidservant made their own eruv somewhere else, and now the master goes somewhere else. So that's why he trumps over that. But and therefore, it would be the similar case. The parallel case of the wife would be where she says, no, I don't want to be with your eruv. That's when she is out of it. So therefore, the conclusion is silence on the part of the wife is considered consent. Okay, so he makes an eruv and she doesn't say anything. Then she can still follow him and walk wherever he can walk. All right, so that concludes that section. This shitikake hoda'ah becomes very dangerous nowadays in WhatsApp groups. Because there's always one person that has to text some radical thing, and then do you have an obligation to object to it when you see that, right? Or if everybody's quiet, does that mean okay, that's the last word standing? But then if everybody objects, then every WhatsApp group blows up into a big fight. Okay. So I think we should not assume shitikake hoda'ah in WhatsApp groups. All right, and now the next Mishnah, which will be about the amounts. Kamahu shi'oro. How much do you need to put for an eruv? We saw yesterday that it was, or 2 days ago, that it was just a small little roll for a fig's worth, a dried fig's worth for each person, up to 18 people, and 18 people or more, all you need is 2 meals, right? Even for 100 people, all you need is 2 meals. But now the question is, how much is 2 meals worth of bread? So mezon shetes seudot lechol echad ve'echad. Mezono lachol velo l'shabbat ived b'meir. When we're calculating how big is a meal, we do a standard weekday meal. Not to be a special Thanksgiving dinner, right? Just a regular meal. Okay, that's to be meir. The Yehuda omer l'shabbat velo lachol. No, a Shabbat meal has to be a Shabbat meal, which you would assume would be bigger, right? But actually, both of them are trying to figure out which is less. Now, that doesn't make sense for Rabbi Meir. A weekday meal would be less. So, what is the Yehuda talking about? Well, how would that be less? It seems as follows. We're talking about specifically the bread that you would eat. So, on Shabbat, when you have a lot more meat and vegetables and tasty dishes, you'd eat less bread. During the week, when all you have is a little hummus, so then you eat more bread. So that could be the understanding of it. Or on Shabbat, we eat 3 meals. And so therefore, each meal is smaller than the 2 meals that they usually had in a weekday. Okay, in either case, both of them were just trying to figure out which is the smaller of the meals between the Shabbat meal, bread, and the weekday bread in a meal. So that's 2 opinions. And now the next 2 opinions are going to give a specific amount. This is going to get into some calculations of measurements and monetary denominations. I'm not going to get too much into the details. The calculations are here. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka omer, mikikar bepunjon me'arba sein basela. We're correlating volume with monetary amounts. So a se'ah is a volume measurement of wheat. For 4 se'ah, when you can buy 4 se'ah of wheat for 1 selah, so that amount of money, how much of a loaf could you make with 1 punjon, which is 1/48th of a selah? Got that? So 1/48th of 4 se'ah. If you do all the calculations, then that comes out to 1/4 of a kav. That's the Yochanan ben Beroka's opinion, that a meal is 1/4 of a kav of bread. Second opinion, the Shimon omer, shete yadot lekikar mishalosh kav. It's 2/3 of 1/3 of a loaf that's made out of 1/3 of a kav. So 2/3 of 1/3 is 2/9. So 2/9 would be for 2 meals. So 1/9 would be 1 meal, 1 meal's worth of bread. So that's the 2 opinions: 1/4 or 1/9. All right, we're going to see some discussion about this. We're going to reevaluate Rabbi Yochanan, because we're going to see a braita that says these 2 have to be almost equivalent, and this is not almost equivalent. It's like less than half. and so we're going to deduct the grocer's cost from Rabbi Yochanan, and thereby come to 1/8. That's going to be the conclusion. But let's see how we get there. One more thing in the Mishnah. Half of that amount is the amount that you would need if someone goes into the house of a leper. If he stays there a short time, then he only becomes a little bit tameh. If he stays there a long time, all of his clothes also become tameh. How long is a long time? Enough time to eat half of a loaf of this amount. Okay. And a quarter of that, if a kohen eats a quarter of this amount of tameh food, then he becomes a light level of tumah, in which he is not allowed to eat terumah or kodashim. So it's just relating two other laws to this measurement. Okay, now Gemara. How much is this? Well, we already said how much this is. This question must be going on the first two opinions, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who just said a Shabbat meal or a weekday meal, but didn't specify. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav terteh difta ikaryata, Ravada Barava Amar terteh difta nehar papita. So this is either the farmers' loaves of bread or the loaves that they make in the Papa River. I'm sure that back then they knew how big these loaves were and could tell what that means. Amar Rav Yosef Rav Yosef bered Rava Abuch keman sebarale. So Rav Yosef asks different Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, what did your father Rava do? He followed Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir who said that it's the weekday loaves, and those are the ones that are smaller, right? Mezonot lechol v'lo l'Shabbat. So that's what he followed. I agree. I also think that the weekday loaves of bread are smaller than Shabbat because the popular thing that people say, there's always room for dessert, right? In other words, when you have good, tasty food, then you eat much more. And so Shabbat, they would, go out of their way and get meat and fatty food and spicy food, and so it tasted better. Obviously, they ate more on Shabbat, even including the bread. Okay, so that resolves that. And now last point, Rabbi Yochanan ben Berakah Omer Tana ukrobim dibrehen liot shavin. There's a braita that says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Berakah's opinion and Rabbi Shimon's calculation are almost identical. Well, what do you mean? Midameh Rabbi Yochanan abba seudata lekabah. Rabbi Shimon tesha seudata lekabah. Rabbi Shimon said that there's 4 meals to a kav. In other words, a meal is a quarter of a kav. Rabbi Shimon, this is 9 meals to a kav. In other words, each meal is a ninth. A quarter and a ninth, those are very far apart. You know what? When you're calculating Rabbi Yochanan, you didn't calculate the baker's cost. He's not just selling you flour. He has to go and put in the processing fees. Like shipping and handling. So therefore, take out a third. Or in other words, divide by 2/3. So a quarter times 2/3, you get 1/6. That's what Rabbi Yochanan's opinion was. Now a 6 and a ninth is closer, but still not very close. One has a ninth and one has a sixth. Or rather, one has 9 meals to a kav and one has 6 meals to a kav. A different statement of Rav Chisda says that the commission for the grocer, for the baker, is half markup. Okay, then in that case you multiply a quarter times a half, you get an eighth. Well, an eighth and a ninth are very close, so that makes sense. And we resolved that. Okay, resolve that, but still, now there's 2 statements of Rav Chisda. One time he said you have to take off a third for the grocer's fee. Another one says you have to give a half to the grocer's fee. Which one is it? Lakasha hadeka yahe ba'al habayit CB, hadela yahe ba'al habayit CB. Depends if the buyer provides the wood. If the buyer provides the wood, that's an important expense, and it only has to pay a third. But if the baker has to provide the wood to bake it, then that costs more, and therefore that would be a half. So this is like when we used to take car services, and who pays the tolls, tolls included or not, or the gas. whose car you're using. So all that makes a difference in the final price. And so now they are almost the same, and we'll be able to resolve that. And that is the end of the daf today. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.